You know, there aren't that many differences between this story and the one we talked about yesterday with Dish Network and its auto hop, which allows people to skip ads. It's made the broadcasters very angry. This Aereo story has made them equally angry. For some perspective on what it means for the broadcasters, let's talk to a guy who follows all the big media companies, Disney, News Corp. David Banks, an analyst with RBC Capital Markets, and he joins us from his firm's trading floor. David, one of the arguments that was made in court today by the broadcasters was not only that Aereo is basically skirting the distribution system, but this is something that is mandated by Congress. They're bringing in Washington to this fight. Is it a good argument?
Well, you know, look, of the legal experts I've spoken to, I actually think this is not a slam dunk for the broadcasters, and that Aereo, you know, has an argument on a number of levels. The first and foremost is, you know, they're basically saying that they're not like a cable service provider. They don't need a license because they're essentially Radio Shack for the 21st century. They are renting you the use of a remote antenna. They're not providing a cable. It's your dedicated antenna. You're renting it from them for $12 a month, and they're taking a signal and kind of bringing it to you in your house. It's your personal signal. And the broadcast companies are saying that, well, you know, if it's a live stream that you're shooting to us, that you're shooting to your customer, well, then that really is retransmission, and you know you need to pay us. And Aereo is then saying, well, actually, technically, there's a little buffer in there, a little bit of delay in the signal, you know, a matter of seconds, that makes it not actual retransmission. So there's a lot of kind of technicalities going on here. And just, if I may, like, I think the upshot of it is, John, that if it's really based upon technicalities, I think ultimately Congress will probably intervene and say, you know, this wasn't the spirit of the law, and they would probably close the loophole. That's how I think it could end that way.
Well, that would be an interesting development, but you talked about retransmission, the retransmission fees, and we can show a chart. I mean, the broadcasters have spent so much energy already over the last few years to get the paid TV players to give them money, and there is our chart. I mean, it shows you that number has gone up and up and up, and so that's why the rabbit ears argument doesn't really cut it with the broadcasters, right?
Right. I mean, look, the retransmission consent revenue stream has absolutely positively transformed the state of the broadcast network industry. And, you know, I would argue it would, you know, look at the stock performance of names like CBS that were based largely in part, you know, in part based on, you know, this retransmission consent ramp. And so
getting all this content,
ultimately, look, whether or not Aereo wins, my honest view is that Aereo is kind of a footnote in history. Aereo might as well just be a law firm right now. The real issue becomes, if Aereo wins, what stops Cablevision and Dish? You know, think about a guy who's just a natural disruptor like Charlie Ergen at Dish. Why doesn't he buy Aereo and just kind of adopt it and stop paying retransmission consent? And that's the game changer. That's what's really fascinating.
Let me just jump in on that area, on the Charlie Ergen point, because Bob Iger, the head of Disney today, he didn't talk about Aereo, but he did talk about this Dish auto hop. And what he said, here's the quote: "It feels like a bite the hand that feeds you approach." Now, tell me, David, we've only got about 30 seconds, why it is that the content players are getting hit from both Dish and Aereo at the same time. What is it about this particular time that is forcing them to be on the defensive?
Technology. Technology, technology, and technology. These are just developments that are occurring that you can't stop, that arguably the consumer wants, and that's what's happening. Technology is morphing, and it's making it possible.
Very quickly before we go, Lionsgate came out with the results after the bell. We'll probably get an outlook from them tomorrow. Do you think it'll be an encouraging outlook? Because the street reaction to the Lionsgate numbers was not a good one.
I think it will. Look, if I were Lionsgate, what I'd be doing today is kitchen sinking the fourth quarter. I'd be, you know, taking as much write down on existing content as I could. It's kind of a crummy quarter anyway. They didn't make any money from Hunger Games this quarter because it was only out for 8 days. You set yourself up for 2013. That's what I think is probably happening. I bet you the stock goes up tomorrow.
We will watch for that development. David, thanks as always. David Bank of RBC Capital Markets joining us from New York.